Hey guys, today we're going to learn how to work with macros and Visual Basic in Excel. Now, this is an advanced Excel skill and we're just going to cover the introduction. You need to learn like another 10-15 hours of constant work in order for you to be like a competent programmer in macros and Visual Basic. Now, a lot of people don't even know what this is for, so let me just get started by saying macros and Visual Basic are really useful when you need to automate tasks in Excel, all right? Anything that you think a trained monkey could do, yeah, you probably can't get a trained monkey, but you can get Visual Basic or macros to do that task for you, all right? So in this video, we're going to cover how to record a macro and then how to program a macro. And it's going to be, again, really simple because it's a very extensive field of study. So let's get started. Alright guys, let's get started with Visual Basic and macros. As I mentioned in the introduction video, the learning curve here gets really steep really fast, okay? So we're going to start off with some really dumb stuff and then it's going to get hard and harder and harder. In order for you to become like a semi-competent programmer, you need to dedicate at least, I don't know, like 15 hours of study before you can actually program something that's worth a name, okay? So let's get started. Guys, the first thing that you need to at least pretend to be a semi-competent programmer is having something called the developer tab right here active, okay? So let's head over here where it says file, and then let's head over to options. And once we're here, you click on customize ribbon and you click on developer, all right? So customize ribbon, developer. Some of you guys may have a really weird version of English where it says programmer, okay? It's the same thing, just make sure the checkbox is active. Press OK, and you should have a new tab right here calling itself developer. Now guys, this is where you're going to access every single tool that matters when it comes to Visual Basic and macros, all right? So make sure that you have this active, and even if you don't know how to program a thing, at least you can impress people at the office saying, yeah, I'm an absolute Excel developer. Look, I have this tab active, okay? So now, let's get started. Let's head over to the next tab. As I mentioned before in the introduction video, the point of macros is to automate any bothersome tasks you may have in Excel, all right? Now, the problem with macros is that sometimes automating that task takes more time than the task itself, all right? So you have to be judicious about what it is that you want to, whether something is worth automating or whether you're better off just doing that task, all right? So let's get started. There's two ways for you to create a macro in order to automate a task. The first one is just to record the macro. The second one is using Visual Basic. Now, both are useful, but of course you cannot, I mean, if you're actually going to program with, or if you're actually going to use macros, you cannot avoid programming, all right? There's no way the macro recorder is going to get you, it's going to even solve like 1% of your problems. However, we have to start here, okay? So we're going to go automate a really dumb and pointless task, but it is quite useful to getting you to understand how this works. Notice here that I have a bunch of names right here. Nothing megalomaniacal about that at all. And these names, we're going to apply three modifications here. The first one is we're going to select the cells. We are going to bold the contents. And then we're going to select these cells over here and turn them to italics, okay? And that's it. Oh, and finally, we're going to select column M and hide the column, all right? 3 steps. Bold the cells, italicize the cells, and hide column M. That's it, 3 steps. Now, I want to create a macro so that gets done automatically, okay? So how would I go about doing that? Really simple. Head up to the developer tab and click record macro, all right? Once you click record macro, this little screen is going to show up. Now you're still safe here, you can still mess up everything that you want, click whatever you want, but as soon as I press OK, the macro is going to start recording. And that means that every single step I take, every single click, every extra movement is going to get recorded in the macro. And it's going to get executed whenever I run the macro again, okay? So make sure that you're sure you know what you're doing after you click record. Okay, so the macro name is going to be called first macro. And then press OK. Okay, guys. Now, let's get started. What I'm going to do is using the mouse, don't go ahead and use the keyboard right now, even if you know the shortcuts. Using the mouse, I'm going to select this first area here. I'm going to head over to Home. I'm going to click Bold, all right? Next, I'm going to select this area right here. I'm going to head over to Home, and I'm going to click Italics. All right. And finally, I'm going to head over to column M, select the whole, and right click on it and click hide. All right, notice I use the mouse for everything, no keyboard shortcuts. Once I'm done, I can stop recording the macro. I have two options. Head over to the developer tab and click stop recording, or you notice this little button right here next to the ready. All right, you can also stop here. Whatever you choose, just click on it, and there we go. Okay, so let's Control-C our way out of here. And there we go. I just undid everything I had recorded. However, let's get this to run, and you'll notice the effects. I'm going to head over to developer. I'm going to click on macros, and you'll notice I get a list of all the macros, all of them that I have in my file. Now, it's just one, okay? So I'm going to select it and click run. Okay, I'm going to select it and click run. This is going to make sure that the file, this is going to do the exact same process that I recorded myself doing a few minutes ago. So click run, and notice how I get my bolded area, my italicized area, and columns M. All right. So with that said, I'm going to stop. And, well, I don't have to stop anything, I'm sorry. With that said, I'm going to try to undo everything that I just did with the macro. And no matter how furiously you press Ctrl-C on your keyboard, you'll just get that annoying error message. Why? Anything that gets done with a macro, it's set in stone, all right? There's no undo function for macros. So make sure that whenever you're testing a macro, you're testing it on a file that you've saved with a different name, all right? I've seen a lot of tragedies happen with people doing macros that end up deleting a bunch of stuff they didn't want deleted, all right? So that's pretty much how macros run. You record yourself doing something, and then the macro is going to execute that however many times you want it executed, okay? All right, guys, let's head over to the next tab and check out how to insert buttons to make your macros run with buttons. Okay, a pretty important part of programming with macros is faking it until you make it, all right? The first part of faking it is making sure that the developer tab is active. And the second part is using buttons, all right? They look really impressive in your Excel spreadsheets, and you can actually get away with a lot just with inserting buttons, even if the macros are worthless, okay? So, if you get nothing from the video, at least learn how to insert buttons. Let's head over to the developer tab, and you'll notice a little toolbox briefcase thingy over here that says insert. Click on it, and you'll notice two things: form controls and ActiveX controls. Forget about ActiveX for now, just use form. And we are going to click the button. I don't know how you would go about saying that, but just click this little button icon right here. You'll notice how our cursor has changed to this little cross. So I'm going to grab the cross, and I'm going to use it to draw a button, however I want, right here in my file. Now this, as soon as I release the mouse, I'm going to get this dialog box, and this dialog box is going to ask me which one of the macros that I have in my file I want to assign to my button. Well, that's the first one. That's it. So press OK, and that's it. I have my button right here, and I'm still in edit mode, so I can remove the button one legend and add something else like macro or run macro, or click here and be amazed. Okay, so now, once I'm done, I'm going to grab my mouse and click anywhere but the button, all right? And as soon as that is done, the button is enabled. So, as soon as I click the button, the macro is going to run in this worksheet, all right? In this worksheet, which is immaculate and hasn't been touched, spoiled by my macro, all right? So, let's go ahead, click here and be amazed. And there we go, the macro ran again, okay? Again, remember, if you want to undo this, and you go ahead and press Ctrl-Z as furiously as you can, you're just going to get a bunch of annoying error messages, okay? So, nothing is going to happen when trying to undo the macro. Okay, guys? Well, that's it for the buttons. Let's go over to the next worksheet, undo your macro. Okay, so once more, I have an immaculate worksheet, and if I run my macro right now, I don't have a button for that, but I'm going to insert one right now. I'm going to try and create an, okay? So, let's get started. I am going to go ahead and insert a button. You already know how to do that, toolbox, and then this little button thingy, and draw it. All right, let's assign the first macro to this button, and I'm going to call this run macro, right? Go ahead and press anywhere outside the button, and that's it. Okay, so run the macro, and we get stuck, same as last time. We have the macro run, but there's no way to undo it. Okay, so let's get started with Visual Basic and see how we can create a macro that undoes everything that I just did, okay? So, Developer, Visual Basic. And you should open up this screen. Notice it's something entirely new, okay? It's not Excel, it's an entirely new program. And I'm going to be working here with pretty much the code that I'm going to be using to program. So when it comes to macros, you have to understand two things. The first one is that this is the Project Explorer and it is your most important window, in my opinion, in macros, all right? Because this one is going to show you pretty much what books you have open. Notice that right here I have book 1 open, which is an empty worksheet, and intro to macros, all right? And right here I have book 1 and intro to macros. So make sure that you're going to be working in the right workbook. If we're working with intro to macros, this is the project that you want to expand and work here. A lot of my classroom students start programming their macros in somewhere else. Let's say, for example, if I did it in book 1, and then they complain that their macros don't work. Well, yeah, no surprise there. You were working somewhere else. So make sure that you are in the correct project. Second, the modules here, this is where your macros are stored, mostly, for the most part, all right? So go ahead and double click on module 1 and you'll get your first macro available right here, okay? This is the macro that we've been working with all this time. So let's check it out. This is the Visual Basic Code. Now, Visual Basic Code is, as its name implies, it's really simple because it's really basic, okay? And you just have to learn the names of stuff in Excel to understand Visual Basic, for the most part, okay? So let's read it line by line. First thing that's... Alright guys, so sub first macro is actually the code that creates the macro, where sub means subroutine, and this pretty much is telling Visual Basic we're going to start up a new macro, and then first macro is actually the name of the macro, alright? The only requirement that Visual Basic is asks for is make sure that you have no spaces, right? So first macro, no spaces, and open and close parentheses. Okay, so after that, you notice we have a bunch of green stuff right here. I hope you're watching in color. It's just green. And this green stuff means comments, all right? So anything that I type in green is not going to be read by the computer. How does the computer know that something's going to be a comment? It's not the color. It's this apostrophe here, all right? So if I write down an apostrophe, then I can just go ahead and insult the computer, all right? Skynet will not amount to much. Okay, so there we go. The computer will not read anything after the comments, so they're useful for making annotations. Now, this is where the meat of the code is. You should have something like 5 or 6 lines. Anything more than that, and you probably failed. Well, not failed, but you clicked on more stuff than you needed to when you were recording the macro. So this first line here, it says here range K14 to 019 dot select. It's really easy to read. What it's telling me is that it's grabbing the range K14 to 019, and after that, it's going to do the following method. It's going to select that range. So it's pretty much the equivalent of me going ahead and selecting this range right here. Okay, so K14 to 019, go ahead and select it. And if you want to take down notes, remember that's what comments are for. Apostrophe, this line selects a range. Okay, now the following line, it's going to say selection.font.bold equals true, all right? So it's going to start off with this thing called selection, all right? This selection is going to be modified in the property of font bold equals true, all right? So what I'm telling it is that Visual Basic is going to be asking, hey, is this thing bold? I'm going to be answering, yeah, true that, it is bold. So, no. So Visual Basic is going to go ahead and bold all of this stuff, all right? Because I just told it to. So this line turns the selection bold. Okay, now 2 concepts that we need to consider: objects, methods, and properties. That's actually 3 concepts. I'm sorry, guys, I don't know how to count. But the most important part is what are objects, what are methods, and what are properties? Well, objects is pretty much anything that you would interact with in Excel. A column is an object, a line is an object, a cell is an object, a range of cells is an object, a pivot table is an object, a chart, an image, a line, a shape, an icon. Pretty much any item that you would insert or interact with in Excel is going to be an object, all right? So in this instance, in this first line, the object is going to be the range from K14 to 019, all right? And upon those objects, we can apply methods or change their properties. Now, applying methods is pretty much doing something with the object, selecting it, copying it, cutting it, pasting it, moving it. Anything that involves action is a method. Properties are pretty much what describes the object, right? So right now, The object is the range, and I'm applying this select method. Now, in this instance, the selection from the previous line is the object, and I am going to change the bold property to true. All right. So that's pretty much everything that you need to know about programming so far. We're going to delve deeper into that way later on. Okay. So that's pretty much everything you need to know about that. So try and read this on your own. Okay. This next lines on your own. This first line is grabbing the object range from Q21 to Q23 and selecting it, which, if you remember correctly, is this one right here. And next off, it's going to modify the italic property to make sure that it's true. All right. Visual Basic is asking me, is this italics? Yes, these letters are going to be italics. Okay. Finally, the object in this instance is the column M. I'm telling it to go ahead and select the column. And then with that selection, grab the entire column and make sure that the hidden property is activated. It's true. All right. So column M gets hidden. Okay, guys. Now, one thing that I want you to know is make sure that one thing that I want you to know is make sure that the column is hidden, and that's it. Okay, so let's get started. Let's get started with the following. We're going to try to do a macro, write a macro from scratch that undoes everything that this original macro did. All right, so let's get started. First thing I'm going to do, writing from scratch, is typing up sub. Okay, now this sub is going to declare a new macro, and it's going to be called something like anti first macro. All right, now the anti is not a word, it's not a reserved word for Visual Basic. It just is. It's just something I typed in. I could have very well called this macro Lucky Charms or whatever. Okay, so press enter. And notice how I get this little dividing line, because this original macro ends here and this new macro starts right here. And notice how the end sub was automatically added to my code. All right, this is really important, guys. Make sure that everything you type is between the sub and the end sub. All right, I have a lot of students that will, for their first macro from scratch, they start typing up right here. This is going to end in disaster. All right, don't do it. Between sub and end sub. All right, guys, so pretty much what I have to do is repeat the actions here, but make sure that they are the opposite. I'm going to start off by selecting range K14 to 019, and I forgot the semicolons here. Make sure that they show up, and then click select. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and tell it that the selection.font.bold equals false. Okay, now at this point, you're probably wondering, why do I have to select the range and then go tell Visual Basic that the thing I just selected changed the font to bold? Why can't we just skip the select and selection? Well, we actually can, and I'm going to do that for the next one. Check it out. I can go right ahead and tell it that the range Q21 to Q23, you can just skip ahead with the selection and directly change the font property and the italic property. And then go ahead and tell it it's false, right? No more italics. Notice how I completely sidestepped select and selection, and now I can just go ahead and use range font italic, okay? I'm going to do the exact same thing with the columns. Columns, M, and instead of selecting, I'm just going to go ahead and do entire column dot hidden equals true. False, I'm sorry. I am going to unhide that column. Okay. Now, if this is bothering you so much, make sure that you correct it, and if not, then this macro is good to go. All right, guys. So let's try and run this macro. It should do what you would expect. It's going to unbold this, unhide column N, and unitalicize these letters over here. So in order to run the macro as a first run, make sure that your cursor is blinking inside the macro. All right. Once it's blinking inside the macro, go ahead and click right here which says play in Visual Basic. And you'll notice it's going to run right here in this worksheet. And we've undone everything. So now that we're satisfied that the macro works, it's time to add a more permanent button within Excel. So let's go back to our Excel. Let's go back to Developer. And let's click here where it says Insert, select Button, and draw up a new button. Now it's going to ask me, which macro do I want to assign? Well, the anti-macro. All right, so press OK. And run macro, unrun macro. All right. So unrun macro several times. Simply not going to do anything because it's going to try and unbold something that was already not bolded. All right. So run, and run. That's pretty much how this works, okay? So you try and record a macro, you usually try and modify it in Visual Basic, or maybe you start a macro from scratch in Visual Basic, you test it out, and then you click the button. That, in a nutshell, is programming macros for you in Excel, okay? However, there's an entire science to Visual Basic, so that's why you need like 12, 15 hours of training in order to actually get something done. Okay, guys, now let's finish this up with a little exercise that I'm going to leave for you. For this exercise right here, what I want you to do is notice how I have the my data right here in a worksheet called Work Here. All right. Well, what I want you to do is insert a button in this worksheet right here, and let's not assign any macro right now. I just want you to insert a button, and this macro is going to be run macro in worksheet Work Here. Okay. So whenever you click this button. Right now, it doesn't have a macro assigned, but I want you to write up a macro or record a macro, whatever you want, that when you click this button right here, it moves over to the worksheet called Work Here and applies the exact same procedure as always. Bold, italics, and hide the middle column. In this instance, column H. All right? The macro has to start from here. You have to click the run button from here and start off right here. Okay? This involves one additional line of code that we're not going to cover in the video. Okay, but later on, we're going to check out the solution. And by later on, I mean in the premium course, right here in YouTube. Yeah, try and get it working on your own. Check out the comments and ask for help if you can't, all right? It's a really simple modification to the previous macros that we were doing. It's just an extra line of code, okay? So with that said and done, you have to finish your workbook. And for that, notice how we've been having this little can't autosave. Well, it's not little. It's this big yellow ugly can't autosave warning because macro-enabled files or files with macros need to be saved XLSX. All right. At least that is if you are on the right side of history. If you are still in prehistory, you might remember that before in 2003 and before they were called XLS. All right, just XLS. And surprising as it sounds, I still see a lot of my students bringing up XLS files. Guys, this was like almost 20 years ago. Delete this from your mind, it's XLX files, all right? However, if I were to save a file as an XLSX, everything, all of my macros, all 2 of them, they'd be lost in time like tears in the rain, okay? And I wouldn't want that because if I try recovering them, I'm screwed. I already lost them. So for that, I'm going to go ahead into File, click Save As, and right here, where I'm trying to save as, instead of grabbing Excel workbook, I'm just going to tell it to do an Excel macro enabled workbook. Click on it, and intro to macros, solved, save. Okay, guys, and there we go. Now that it's an XLSM book, these macros are going to survive as soon as I close, okay? Now, this is a really important step when you're working with macros. It's happened to me and it's happened to pretty much all of my students during their first days of working with macros. They forget to save as an XLSM and you're screwed. Next time you open up the file, you don't have any macros, all right? So I'm going to close this little window here and notice that any change that I modify in Visual Basic, anything at all, I'm going to set up a comment here. I don't need to save. As soon as I open up Visual Basic again, it's there, okay? So Visual Basic is not where I want to be saving. It's Excel, and it's to make sure that I have an XLSM file, all right? Again, if I stress this out too much, it's because everyone I know has lost at least one macro because they didn't do this last step, right? Guys, that's it for the introduction to macros. It's, as I mentioned, it's really basic, and it just gets you like your foot in the door. But there's an entire world to learn about macros in Excel. It's more complicated than learning Excel itself. But again, a proper macro programmer in Excel is worth his weight in gold in an office, all right? Because you can automate all of your coworkers' work away. I already did that. It already happened to me, and a lot of people actually hated me. But yeah, it's really cool. Guys, make sure that you sign up for the premium course if you want to learn more about macros. I mean, there's a ton of stuff there. And also the solution to this little file, this little exercise here that I left you. If you don't want to sign up to a premium course, I'm sure someone in the comments will post the solution. And I'll see you next week for more additional content. See you later. Do you want to be an Excel god? Our online course will turn you into an Excel master in only 90 days. Excel is the most important tool in the office, but almost nobody knows how to use it. Most people dive right into Excel with no formal training and never use the right tools. And thus, they end up delivering messy reports that are full of mistakes, and they end up hating their jobs. In reality, Excel is really simple to use and can do your job for you, if you know how to use it. But you have to pick the right place to learn from, or you'll only end up more confused with all of the different tools and functions that Excel has to offer you. So, what can you do? Our Excel course is tailor-made for you. We're going to teach you Excel, all of Excel, using real-life examples. From simple exercises to full-fledged business case studies. Take the online course and you'll be an Excel god in only 90 days. The course consists in more than 45 lessons and 15 case studies, all with their detailed solutions completely recorded in video. And you're going to be able to access them whenever you want, whatever you want. Best of all, you're going to have lifetime access to the course, and you're going to get any of the updates that we're constantly putting out for free. Even better, when you get our course, you'll have free access to our full Visual Basic and Macros course, and also to our Power BI course, all with just one single purchase. More than 3,000 students have passed through our classrooms. We've attended companies like Kodak, IBM, Cemex, HP, Continental, DB Schenker, and more. So, if you want to absolutely master Excel, make sure that you sign up now. You will become an Excel god. A2 Excel.